Act I, Scene 2 opens in Othello's lodgings at the Sagittary. Enter Othello, Iago and attendants with torches, and we finally get to meet the man who was the target of such vitriol in the opening scene. In common with Act I, Scene 1, it also begins in medias res, as we discover Iago in full flow, giving Othello his own version of what has just happened with Roderigo and Brabantio. As we have been forewarned by Iago himself that he is not what he is, it goes without saying that this bears little resemblance to what we witnessed actually go down. Iago's skills at being a manipulator and dissembler are once more on show. We've already seen him effortlessly deceive the gullible Roderigo and the vain and pompous Brabantio to get them to do his bidding. How will he fare with Othello? He's in the middle of complaining that even though in his life as a professional soldier I have slain men, yet do I hold it very stuff of the conscience to do no contrived murder. He claims that he lacks iniquity, or the necessary evil-mindedness, sometimes to do me service, because 9 or 10 times I had thought to have yerked or stabbed him here under the ribs. So enraged was he apparently at Roderigo's defamation of Othello's character. What Iago has cleverly done here in the space of 5 lines is not only reassure Othello of his loyalty, to the extent that he dearly wished to kill someone who had insulted his master, but also portray himself as a man whose innate goodness is such that it prevents him from doing what is best for himself. This speech is, therefore, heavy on dramatic irony, a technique where the audience knows something of which one or more of the characters on stage are unaware, and this will characterise Iago's interactions with nearly all of the characters because only we, and Roderigo to a certain extent, know what his true intentions are. Othello's first speech belies the portrait of him that has been painted in the first scene by Iago, Roderigo and Brabantio. In its mere 5 words, "'Tis better as it is," he presents himself as a character who is measured in his thinking, is unreactive to the undoubtedly inflammatory language that Iago has been using before we came in on the conversation, and is satisfied that his ensign did not seek vengeance on his behalf. We're beginning to see that the impression we have been given of him thus far, of an extravagant and wheeling stranger, is far from the truth. We suspect that Iago will have much more of a job on his hands to get Othello wrapped around his little finger. Iago is not content to leave it there. He tries again, laying it on thick, that he prated and spoke such scurvy and provoking terms against your honour, that, with the little godliness I have, I did full hard forbear him. In other words, Roderigo spoke in such a derogatory and insulting manner about him that it took all the Christian sentiment he could muster to refrain from attacking him. He goes on to warn Othello that if it is indeed true that he is fast married, he is sailing in dangerous waters, as Brabantio is a popular and influential Venetian nobleman, and as such can make Othello's life very difficult, by using all the legal powers he has at his disposal. He has the power to divorce you, or put upon you what restraint and grievance the law, with all his might to enforce it on, will give him cable. Othello is not in the least perturbed, and indicates that he will do nothing to evade a confrontation with him. Let him do his spite. He is confident that the services which I have done the Signory, or the Venetian government, shall out-tongue or speak louder than his complaints. He has nothing to fear, as he himself is descended from men of royal siege, and he is therefore deserving of the position he has reached. He assures Iago that his marriage to Desdemona was neither impetuous nor done to better his situation, as he would never have given up his freedom if it weren't for the fact that he loves her. But that I love the gentle Desdemona, I would not my unhoused free condition put into circumscription and confine for the sea's worth. The sight of the lights approaching interrupts his speech, and Iago tries to encourage Othello to go back inside, presumably to manufacture an impression of guilt. Othello, however, is not to be so grossly manipulated at this point. He is no Roderigo, and he is adamant that he will not flee because he has no need to. Not I. I must be found. My parts, my title, and my perfect soul shall manifest me rightly. In other words, the qualities of his character, his rights as Desdemona's husband, and his clear conscience shall speak for him. When he asks if it is indeed Brabantio and his men approaching, note how Iago appropriately swears by Janus that he believes it isn't. Janus was the two-faced Roman god of new beginnings, after whom the month of January is named, so called because it faces both the old year and the new, and reminds us of how two-faced Iago is being. Indeed, it is not Brabantio, but Othello's new lieutenant, Cassio, who enters with officers and torches. Othello appears relieved as he greets them with the goodness of the night. Cassio wastes no time informing him that the Duke requires your haste-post-haste appearance even on the instant, to urgently discuss a development in the Cyprus wars. The galleys or ships have been sending update after update at one another's heels, and many of the other consuls have been woken and are at the Duke's already. As Othello can't be found at his usual lodgings, 3 separate search parties have been sent out to locate him. Cassio is clearly unaware of what has been going on, as he asks Iago, as soon as Othello has stepped momentarily away, presumably to tell Desdemona where he is going, what Othello is doing there in the first place. Iago switches to his malicious, gossipy and vulgar self, to cast a doubt on the purity of Othello's motives, as he reveals that tonight he hath boarded a land carrack, or treasure ship, and if it prove lawful prize, i.e. if his marriage is permitted to continue, he's made or set forever. In other words, he insinuates that for Othello it is all about sex and money and not about love, in direct contradiction to what Othello has just stated. Cassio is none the wiser, asking Iago to clarify his comments. Note how Iago doesn't want to get caught gossiping about his master, as he quickly turns the word married to the mild oath marry, or by the Virgin Mary, in order to cover his tracks as Othello unexpectedly returns. Before they can leave, however, Cassio announces the arrival of another troop to seek for you. Brabantio enters, accompanied by Roderigo and officers with lights and weapons. Iago, secretly revelling in Othello getting into hot water, makes a show of loyalty, warning him that Brabantio comes to a bad intent, which of course he has been instrumental in causing. Brabantio immediately challenges Othello, denouncing him as a thief. Iago takes this as a cue for a sword fight between the 2 factions of men, and so singles out Roderigo as his opponent, so they can just pretend to be fighting one another. You, Roderigo, come, sir, I am for you. Othello, however, disappoints Iago yet again, as he has no intention of getting himself embroiled in a street brawl. He commands the men to keep up or put away your bright swords, for the dew will rust them. These words are reminiscent of Christ's words to Peter, "Put up thy sword into the sheath," in the Garden of Gethsemane on the eve of his crucifixion, when he is apprehended by troops bearing lanterns and weapons in the presence of Judas the betrayer. The parallels here are undeniable and seem to suggest that Shakespeare wishes us to be on Othello's side. Note how Othello addresses Brabantio with the formal and respectful you form, while Brabantio refuses to reciprocate, addressing him with the insultingly familiar thou, like he did to Roderigo. in order to communicate the contempt he feels for someone who he believes has stolen what is rightfully his. He brands him a foul thief, demanding to know where thou hast stowed my daughter. He accuses Othello of having enchanted her, because that is the only reasonable explanation for her having gone with him in the first place. He cannot believe that someone who he describes as a maid, so tender, fair and happy, so opposite to marriage that she shunned the wealthy curled darlings of our nation, or in other words, was so against the idea of marriage that she went out of her way to avoid the rich and, in Brabantio's view, attractive, eligible bachelors that the court had to offer, would have ever willingly put herself at risk of general scorn and mockery by running from the protection of her family to the sooty bosom of such a thing as thou. Once more Brabantio resorts to racial epithets in order to use Othello's colour against him. Note how he also further dehumanises him by referring to him as a thing rather than a person. For a prejudiced Brabantio, it is easy for him to fall back on racist tropes. So it is obvious to him that Othello must have practised upon her with foul charms, abused her delicate youth with drugs or minerals that weakens motion. Not only does he accuse him of having bewitched her, but also of having drugged her. He resolves to have the matter debated on in court, and so declares his intention of seizing and arresting Othello on the spot for the crimes of being a corrupter and a practiser of arts inhibited, or black magic. Othello calmly stands his ground, retaining his composure in the face of Brabantio's verbal onslaught, even though it is full of racial slurs and baseless accusations, merely telling everyone on both sides to stay their weapons. He maintains his polite tone, asking Brabantio where it is he wishes him to go to answer this your charge. He counters his demand that he be taken directly to prison to await trial, however, by playing his trump card with calmly self-assured rhetorical questions. What if I do obey? How may the Duke be therewith satisfied, whose messengers are here about my side upon some present business of the state to bring me to him? The fact that there is state business, deemed sufficiently important to wake everyone in the middle of the night, does not seem to cut any ice with Brabantio, however. A vain, self-important man, who clearly does not appreciate Othello's indispensability to the Venetian state in this time of war, he believes that this is much more important. Mine's not an idle cause, and is convinced that the other dignitaries will see it the same way. The Duke himself or any of my brothers of the state cannot but feel this wrong as 'twere their own. As far as he is concerned, it is the thin end of the wedge, and if the marriage is allowed to go ahead, the world will be turned upside down as they face being ruled by slaves and heathens. For if such actions may have their passage free, bondslaves and pagans shall our statesmen be. They exit. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos on English language topics and exam techniques, and English literature texts.